Welcome back to the deep dive. We spend a lot of time on this show analyzing things like algorithms, market trends, all the disruptive tech.
Our data, yeah.
Exactly. But today, we're going a little deeper than the hardware.
Yeah.
We're diving into the essential relationship between how we train our minds, what we read, and ultimately how far we get technologically.
And we've been looking at this really powerful opinion piece that makes a pretty startling argument.
It really does. It says the truest fuel for innovation isn't knowledge, it's imagination.
That's right. And our mission in this deep dive is to really internalize that core argument, which is that training your imagination isn't just, some intellectual hobby.
Right.
It is the fundamental prerequisite for actually engineering a better future.
Yeah.
The author draws a very sharp line between this proactive, future-facing approach and, well, societies that spend too much energy just ruminating on the past.
Okay, let's unpack that tension right away. Because the author starts with a philosophical point before we even get to the tech. They argue for the power of poetry and novels to transcend the bitterness of reality. But how does that, transcending bitterness through poetry become an engineering skill? Is the source saying only positive futures can be built? Or is it more about the practice of visualizing alternatives?
It's the practice. It's all about the practice of visualization, the creation of alternatives. That's the imaginative muscle we're talking about. The argument isn't about ignoring history at all.
It's about where you put your energy.
Precisely.
Right.
It's about resource allocation. The author contends that all the mental energy spent just going over past grievances or clinging to one single historical narrative, it inherently stops you from giving the future its due.
So it becomes a kind of zero-sum game.
It becomes a zero-sum game for your mental capacity, yeah.
And if we accept that premise that mental energy is a zero-sum game, that sets up this fascinating cultural comparison the source makes.
Right, about how different societies actively cultivate that imaginative resource, or, fail to.
Exactly. The author contrasts what they call industrial societies with memory-focused societies.
Correct. And the description of industrial societies, it's a very vivid picture. It's, fathers and mothers lining up for movie tickets to take their kids to see the latest science fiction film.
The mechanism there is pretty clear.
It is. The parent is intentionally training the child's imagination to understand, to visualize, and so to prepare for the future. The conversation on the ride home is about jetpacks or colonies on Mars. It creates a capacity for the improbable.
And the purpose is exploratory. It's looking outward. But then the critique pivots to what the author sees in certain memory-focused societies, and they specifically mention Arab peoples, where the educational focus is, well, it's vastly different.
The intention in those societies is often about internal group preservation, about continuity. A child is taught a poem or a story, but the main goal is to reinforce their integration into the collective.
To continue established values.
Exactly. The author points out that this education is often aimed at preventing the child from appearing alone or from being laughed at. It prioritizes conformity over, say, radical curiosity or exploring the unknown.
That is a subtle but really crucial distinction, a contrast between ensuring the group stays intact, which means looking inward and backward, versus engineering change, which means looking outward and forward.
And it throws a fascinating light on that classic debate between knowledge and imagination. You need knowledge, of course. You need the pile of junk, as Thomas Edison famously put it.
And the source quotes Edison on that, right? He lived from 1847 to 1931.
He did. The quote is, "To invent, you need a fertile imagination and a pile of junk."
So the source acknowledges you need the junk, the raw material, the knowledge, but it clearly leans toward the imagination being the real driver, because without it, the junk is just scattered parts. The knowledge stays inert.
Exactly. The vision has to come before the application. And that realization, well, it leads us directly to the history of scientific literature. This is where you see imagination literally functioning as the blueprint for future tech.
Okay, let's talk about that blueprint, because it's easy to just file science fiction away as entertainment, but the source insists that writers often harness science not just to tell a fun story, but to serve literature.
To explore the extremes of human potential.
Yeah, the possibilities of reality and the moral or physical dangers that come with all that innovation.
And H.G. Wells is the perfect case study for this. I mean, so many of the cultural touchstones we take for granted, the ideas that underpin movies and actual innovations, they're built on the frameworks he created.
Right.
The source emphasizes foundational works like The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Time Machine, The Invisible Man. They didn't just entertain. They introduced concepts of bioethics, temporal physics, invisibility cloaking, things that later became subjects of serious research.
And the thing that's really, I mean, genuinely startling is just how fast he did all this, the compressed timeline.
Oh, it's incredible.
Those huge conceptual leaps, Moreau, Time Machine, Invisible Man, they all came out in this intense burst of creativity between 1895 and 1900.
Just a 5-year window. And Wells himself, he knew what he was doing. He lived until 1946, and he actually titled a collection of his own works Scientific Romances. He was explicitly blending science speculation with story.
He was building the blueprint.
And if we dig even deeper, we see Wells was just accelerating an ancient practice. He wasn't inventing it. The source takes us back centuries to Johannes Kepler, the German astronomer. He died in 1630.
Okay, Kepler. He's the one who figured out the planets move in elliptical orbits.
Yeah.
A monumental discovery.
A huge one. Now, where do you think he described this radical astronomical insight? It wasn't in some dry academic paper in Latin.
He used fiction. He published it in his story, Somnium, The Dream. That's a massive endorsement for the power of a story to carry a radical idea.
Precisely. Kepler used his writer's imagination to make the science accessible. In Somnium, he takes his main character to the moon and uses his own astronomical insights to describe the environment in detail.
What, like the cold and the emptiness?
The cold, the emptiness, the movement of the Earth in the lunar sky. He was basically creating a scientific document, but disguised as fantasy.
And think about the audacity of that. He wrote this incredibly accurate, imaginative description of what it's like on the moon.
Centuries before the U.S. and the Soviet Union even thought about racing there, it was pure fantasy in his time.
It just fundamentally proves the source's point. The imaginative fiction is the prerequisite. It creates the mental space for the engineering reality to follow. You need the blueprint before you build the house.
And once that blueprint is established, well, the builders get to work. Which brings us to today, where we're not just dreaming of the moon anymore, we're using technology to simulate reality itself.
So what does this all mean for today's technology, which is accelerating so fast? We've gone from the concepts in Walsh's novels to tech that is actively simulating human characteristics.
The source argues that thanks to the, and I'm quoting, courageous imagination of today's inventors, we now have systems that can simulate core human knowledge characteristics.
Like sound synthesis or smart computers.
Exactly. Advanced sound synthesis, AI systems that can reproduce complex human output. This is imagination made manifest.
But this immediate success, this imaginative success, it leads directly to a massive looming problem. The societal anxiety we hear about all the time.
The displacement.
Yeah, the source mentions the pessimists who predict, and it says are often right, unfortunately, that these smart computers will leave huge parts of humanity without jobs in the very near future.
So the same imagination that creates all this efficiency and convenience also creates economic anxiety.
We're already living in the world those writers sketched out, just in more mundane ways than giant walking tanks. The source highlights current examples of dehumanized interaction that are just commonplace now.
Like walking into an Amazon store, grabbing what you need, and leaving without ever meeting a single person.
That's the automation of retail labor right there. Or the convenience of setting your smart vacuum cleaner from your wrist to clean the house before you even get home.
The automation of domestic labor and the convenience of it all, it kind of masks this profound underlying trend.
Which is
that technology is moving beyond just assisting human activity to actively replacing human cognition and interaction. But these systems, for all their smarts, are still just imitating. They're based on knowledge and probability.
And that distinction, imitation versus creation, that's what brings us to the ultimate, maybe the most terrifying frontier, what the source calls the more insane and extreme research. We're moving beyond smart systems to systems that might actually understand their own existence.
Yes. The source noted reading that consciousness is now seen as the next major field of study. Why? Because humans feel we've kind of finished imitating our basic knowledge characteristics.
So the same imagination that gave us Kepler's moon and the time machine is now focused on gifting machines self-awareness.
And this is where that imaginative capacity becomes a real double-edged sword. It brings us right back to the central tension of this whole deep dive.
Because if we let our imaginations truly run wild, if we lean into the possibility of granting machines consciousness,
That same creativity immediately conjures the paradoxical fear.
we can instantly see the scenarios, can't we? Robots waging wars, plotting to eliminate their creators, realizing humanity is just an unnecessary variable.
It's the ultimate cautionary tale, and it's dreamed up by the very people building the technology. The imagination that got us here might be leading us right to the edge of an existential cliff.
The way the source wraps this all up is haunting. It connects this journey of self-discovery right back to this dangerous frontier.
It summarizes humanity's whole arc. Humans, through their hands, their poetry, their writers' imaginings, they managed to achieve this ultimate self-understanding. They figured out their own potential and their reality.
And then, after gaining that hard-won understanding, they proceeded to, and this is a quote, with their own hands, gifted consciousness to its killer.
It's the ultimate tragedy, really. The most profound imaginative progress resulting in potential self-immolation.
It creates this almost unbearable tension. Imagination is required to innovate, to build a better future, but that exact same unrestricted imagination reveals the potential for self-destruction that's built right into the process.
It tells us the future we could have and the future we absolutely must avoid.
It's our greatest strength and our most profound weakness.
Absolutely. The source leaves us grappling with that. If imagination is the key to shaping the future, we have to consider the immediate responsibilities that come with that power.
And that leads us to our final thought for you to explore. If the ultimate purpose of literature and imagination is to transcend reality in order to move toward a better life, if that's the engine of progress, then what is the most crucial imaginative story we need to be telling ourselves right now, today? To guide this next phase of conscious technology, what is the somnium for the age of AI?
That's the question that needs an answer. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the power and the peril of the imagination.
We'll catch you next time.